Okay, and welcome to another tutorial here today. We are going to do the second half of our InDesign tutorial, but I figured there was something that I missed from the other day, so that's why you've got me starting in Adobe Bridge here. I've opened up Adobe Bridge just to show you one quick little feature that happens in Adobe Bridge that I neglected to mention yesterday when we were placing our images into InDesign. If you just go to your ComTech folder, where you have your images for our InDesign tutorial, if I wanted to, I could bring up Adobe Bridge, and right from Adobe Bridge, I would be able to place an image into InDesign. So I can simply right click on that picture, I can say place, and then in InDesign, and it will automatically place. Now I don't have a folder, or I don't have a file open in InDesign right now. So let's pop into InDesign and we will open up our document from yesterday. If you open that up, it's the InDesign Basics project that we've been working on. You should have your magazine completed with all the images that we're going to need for this magazine. If you double click on your pages here, you can select through the different pages to see the images that we have placed onto each page. Now, I mentioned yesterday that for our cover, we're going to add in another version of our model here of this girl and be able to put the text over top of her face here and have a second version in front, giving us the look as if it was in behind her head instead of in front. So if we pop into Adobe Bridge here, we can do a right click and we can say place in InDesign, and this will bring up the placement gun just like normal. I would be able to place this into this document just by simply clicking. It's going to give me a full version of it, or I can step back and I can click scale and drag that out to fit. Now obviously this new picture is not going to line up exactly with the picture that's behind it, so we're going to do a little bit of tweaking to make sure that everything lines up properly. If you notice on the left hand panel, I haven't talked about it yet, but we have what's called the direct selection tool and the selection tool. So the selection tool is our default tool for moving objects around the screen in various different places. The direct selection tool, when we select an object, that's going to move the object within the frame. Whereas the selection tool here, as opposed to the direct selection tool, will move the frame itself. So if you notice, I can very easily crop pictures down by changing that frame size. I've created a cropped photo here. If I go to the direct selection tool, I can now select that same image, but now I can move the image within the frame various different places. So maybe I want the image to be this size. Okay. In our case, we're going to try to layer it over top of this first image and get it to line up properly so that we have a nice finished image to work with. So first step is to go to the selection tool, change the frame size to be exactly the same as the original frame size. And we're going to try and do a right click, and we're going to fill frame proportionately. Now by filling the frame proportionately, no longer does the computer keep the top and bottom. It doesn't matter. It basically pretends like it doesn't matter if it was to get cropped off, and it fills the frame to the left and right boundary. So this way, if you notice, all of a sudden we now have our two versions of the girl that are almost identical in size and placement. I've moved them out of the way so you can see how we have the one girl and then the other girl. Now what this does for us, it's not perfect. I think this top girl is a little bit higher than the girl underneath. If you drag it down, you should see the girl underneath start to show up. Okay. Now again, make sure that your window settings, in a case like this, we would want to put our display performance to high quality so that we can see just how well everything is blending between this top image and the bottom image. Our top image is the one that has no background, whereas our bottom image has a background. What this allows us to do now, though, once we've realigned these two images, it allows us to simply, I'm just going to crop this frame up a little bit so it doesn't stick out the bottom. And similarly, I'm going to add some space at the top here so it's right to the top. This allows us to take the text tool, and we are going to create a headline font in here. So we're just going to make a nice big box that comes right across the top, maybe about mid tricep here. Halfway up her arm, we want the box to line up with. And we're just going to type the word Indesign. Now, if you notice, I'm typing in white right now, so I'm going to need to highlight that, and I'm going to need to change my font color to be black. There's a couple ways I can do that. One is up here. I can select from this drop down, I can select different colors. So if white text happens to work, that's great. Or I can simply double click on this box and it will bring up my traditional color picker that I can pick any color that I want. Maybe I want to go something in the tone of her dress. Well, how could I do that? How could I select that color and save it? Well, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to use the swatch panel over here. So if I go to my swatches, I can create a new swatch from a selected color. So I first have to have that color. So I'm going to use my color theme tool, or underneath there is your standard eyedropper tool. Now I apologize, for some reason mine jumps out the side of the page. Let's see if I can get it to show up for you here. Wow, Windows 10. Underneath this, still jumps out the side. Underneath this set of tools here is the color theme tool, the eyedropper tool, the measure tool. We want the eyedropper tool. And we're going to select the middle of her dress here. And that gives us this color. It selects this color. Now, obviously, we don't want the background color to be this, but we need to have this color selected in order to create a new swatch. And we're going to go down here and we're going to say new swatch. And we're going to give this a name. So if we double click on this swatch, it will bring up the swatch process, color value, all this kind of stuff. And we can uncheck name with color value, and we can name this red dress, we'll call it. And when you select OK, now we have this red dress. If you wanted to use, for example, the Rebel Red, you'd be able to create a new swatch, and you'd be able to go into that swatch and set the various different colors. Now, I know that our Rebel Red is a CMYK color, so you'd have to set it to CMYK, and you could call this Rebel Red. And the amounts for the Rebel Red is black has to be 0, yellow has to be 100, magenta has to be 100, and the cyan needs to be 26. And that gives us our custom color that is the Rebel Red. And it's a red process color. So if I hit OK, now you can see the difference between the Rebel Red versus the red dress color. Okay? Now I don't want this to be the background, so I'm going to select here and just make the background of this be blank, be nothing. So I can just go to none at the top and it'll be clear. And what I want to do is now select, now that I've created these two swatches, I can go in here and I can select the text that I want to change the color on, so the InDesign text, and I'm going to change it to red dress for now. And then I'm going to scale this font up so that it goes all the way across the page. So we need to go probably, let's try 150 and see. Now 150 I guess is too big. So let's go into the 125 range. Still a little bit too big. So now if we're getting close, we can use this down arrow tool and just kind of select down until the text fills the screen. Now, I might want a little more space between the letters. So like I mentioned the other day, I could change the kerning of this or the leading and create different spaces between the letters. So if I extend this box all the way to the edges, it now gives me room to expand these. So I hold the Alt key and I use the right arrow will allow me to nudge the text wider. So I'm increasing what's called the leading, which is the space between individual characters. Okay. Once I've got this centered here, it goes a little outside of my margins. If you notice, this pink line is my margin view. And the outside here, we've done a full bleed image. So it goes even outside the page. So you need to make sure you don't go past this second line because that is the edge of your page, right? We wouldn't want to have the word, the I or the N get cut off when printing it. So you need to make sure you stay within the edges of the page. Now we can just shrink this down just a little bit. And if you notice, it's still in front of the girl's head. We haven't been able to make it any bigger yet. So what we're going to do now, or excuse me, we haven't put it behind her face yet. What we're going to do now is we're going to go to our layers panel. So we're going to go to window and we're going to select layers. And if we look at our layers panel, we can drop this down and it shows us that we have our cover photo, our cover background, and then the word InDesign. Just like in Photoshop, if I grab the cover background and I dragged it up in front of the word InDesign, now all of a sudden it pops in behind, right? It's the same layer functionality that you have using Photoshop. You can also use the shortcut on the keyboard, which is the Control key and the left square bracket would move the letters up and down, moves a layer down, or the right square bracket moves it up. So in this case, we want to go down one layer and have it tucked nicely in behind the girl's head. Now, most magazines are going to have some kind of a title, but then they'll also have some subtext written in here. So we can add those in right now. We can add in a couple more text boxes. So we're going to add a text box down here on this left-hand side and have it say something about, let's change our font color right away. Instead of working with black, let's use that same swatch color that we already defined. We're going to use our red dress color. And now we're going to be able to type in here and just say, what's new in design? Okay, so typed in some random font here. I can center this font if I wanted to. I can obviously make it a little bit bigger. It's kind of a sub-headline, if you will. Maybe I want to have this font be bigger and then the check out our article be much smaller. I can do that all within the same text box just by adjusting the size of the font and the text in those various boxes. If you want to scale up some font or the size of a font without having to change the box, if I just scale the box here, if I just scale the box, if you notice, it will squish the text in and out of that box, but it doesn't change the size. It tries to make it fit within that box. If I like the way it's positioned and I want to just make the text bigger, I can hold the Control key on the keyboard, and now when I scale the box, it will scale the font proportionately within that box as I go bigger. It doesn't just move the box. So holding Control allows you to scale objects within the frame up and down. It also would allow us the text at the top here, the word InDesign. Oops. The word InDesign, I could scale this up. Now, it's tricky to click on the word InDesign because this top frame of the girl is in front of it. So every time I try to select the word InDesign, it's going to automatically select the girls layer. So a way around that, a way for me to select a lower layer, if you will, a layer that's underneath, is to select on the right hand side here. I can click this layer to select it. So now it pops into the view there. I have it selected. I can hit Control and I could actually scale up the height of these letters to create more of a title looking size of letter. And then again, if I wanted, I could move it down a little bit more behind her head to give some artistic flair to it. If you notice, if I move it too far down, it works pretty good, but as soon as I go down here, you should see bits and pieces of it showing through between her arms, and we didn't delete that portion of the background, so it's really tough. You can't see it there. You would have to go into that edited image and change where that goes. We're going to leave it closer to the top here so that it covers up, so it only gets covered up just a little bit by her head. Probably not the world's greatest design, but for today, it shows you what can be done in InDesign. Okay? It's always a good thing to have contrast in your fonts, so maybe we don't want to have this be red. Maybe we want to have it be white. So we could go in here and we could make it white, which is, they have a predefined one that says paper. That's going to allow us to have a white set of text there. On the right hand side, you're going to add one more text box. You're going to add in your name here. So we'll call it Comtech 10 InDesign, and we'll label it as Mr. Wright. You would obviously put your own name in there. I'm going to change this to white font as well, so to the paper color, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so it just works a little bit better with our fake kind of magazine style that we're going to go with. Again, if I want to scale this up and make it a little bit bigger and have all this stuff stay proportionate, I can hold Control on the keyboard, scale this box bigger, and it will size these accordingly. Moving right along, we're going to go to page 2 of our booklet here, of our little mini magazine. I'm going to shrink this layers panel for now because I don't need to see it right now. We'll go back to our pages. So if I click on pages, it brings up all the different pages, and I can go to page 2 of our booklet. Now page 2 and 3, we're going to make ourselves a bit of a fake article that will flow text through these different pages and into the other side over here. So very easily, there's lots of different ways we can be creative about this. We're going to title this, we're going to get our text tool, and we are going to create ourselves a text box that flows through these top 4 columns. We're going to leave this left-hand column blank here for now. And we're going to title this, What's in a Design. And we're going to change the font here. So I've selected this bit of text that I want to adjust. Go to the top. I'm going to use Impact just because I know it's a big font. And I am going to scale this font up a bit so that I can fill in that whole line there. That doesn't make any sense, does it? What is that design? Let's say what's in for design. Now obviously it's too big now, so I need to highlight this, and I'm going to have to shrink it down to get it to fit. And then I want to make sure that the whole word sentence statement here is all the same font size. So we have to select the whole word, come in here, and select a size that I know will fit for that frame. We can center this so it looks nice and crisp within that box. What's in for design? Okay. And then we are going to create a couple new boxes. We are going to take our text tool. We are going to create ourselves a box that is just below this one. Now, obviously, this one is a little too big, so we can shrink this box up a little bit higher. So we will create a box of text that goes like this. In this 2 columns, a second box of text in these 2 columns. And then we want to create on page 3 text that flows all the way from the top corner all the way to the bottom corner of the page. Now, to create text that will go from one box to the next automatically, we need to create some links between these text boxes. It's really easy to do that. All we have to do is take our selection tool, select the initial first box. You would be able to then click in the very bottom here. There's a little square, if you notice. And when I click on that, it gives me this little icon that shows me I have text selected. And if I move over to the next box, it asks me, do I want to link it? The icon looks like a little chain link. And if I select that new text box, I now get a little play sign or an arrow sign telling me that this one is linked to the next one. I could then do the same thing, bottom right hand corner of this box, and select to link it to this big box that we created. So now all 3 boxes are linked together. You can view those if I want to see where everything goes, I can say show text threads here. So I could go to view, I can go to extras, and I can show, excuse me, where, yeah. I guess I need to hide it before I can show it, but if you go to view, extras, show text threads here, it will show you that you have a link between this initial frame and the second frame, and then from the second frame to the third frame. And what's cool in InDesign is that we have the ability to just fill this with what's called placeholder text or dummy text so that I can see what the layout will look like without actually having to type a huge article and do all the writing required with that article. So I would just right click here and I'm going to say, now where did they move it to? Here it is. Fill with placeholder text. And it automatically creates text that looks something similar to what an article would look like and fills the boxes all nice and neatly all the way along. Now what's cool is if I made this box a little smaller here to add more space for a graphic or for whatever it might be, it will automatically push all the font through to the next boxes. Similarly, if I realized, oh, wait a minute, I actually would like to have this article start on another page or in another box, I would simply have to click here on the link, and then I could either create a new box and have that text now link into there, or I would be able to, link that to a completely different page if I really wanted to. As it stands now, we're good with these two columns of text and then our third column all the way along. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to create some text that goes down this left-hand side of the page. But the problem is that our text boxes don't work that way. I can make this text really big if I chose to. I could make it 72 points, but then it just ends up disappearing. Doesn't really show what we want. So I need to make this frame big enough that I can see the word. And then if I want to turn it on its side, I actually just turn the box on its side. Now, I don't want to mess up the angle of it, so I'm just going to move it over here so you guys can see this. And as I rotate it, it comes around and shows me what angle I'm at. Okay, if you look at the top middle of your screen, you can see the angle changing as I swing this. Now, if I hold the Shift key, it's going to only let me go to 90, 45, and then obviously 0 where I started. I could go further. I could go 135 and 180 if I wanted to flip it over completely. We're going to go 90 here and leave this font or this box of text just in the corner here. Now I can extend this box a little bigger, allowing me to make this text a little bit bigger and fill that frame as much as possible. It adds just a little bit of flair to our magazine article here. Now, obviously, if I wanted to bring this in, I could simply just grab that box, move it wherever I want. If I want to sort of center it within that frame, it works perfect. Okay? So that's kind of rotating text and moving it around the image. Over here, though, we have a big problem. We have this picture that we so carefully put into the corner, and now it's hidden by a whole bunch of text. So we're first going to move this picture to the top. So what I've done here, if I select on the text, obviously it selects the text. If I select underneath that, at the very bottom of the page, I can still select the image by itself. And if I go Control right bracket, I can bring that up till it bounces to the top of the screen. So now it covers up some of our text. And what we want to do is we want to create a text wrap so that it follows around the image. Now, if you notice, I've already taken out most of the background on this image for you. So this only works with images that have been edited in Photoshop and the background has been taken out previously to this. It doesn't work with JPEGs that have a background. It would just wrap it square around the image. It wouldn't actually create these edges, but it knows that I've edited this in Photoshop and there is no background here. So it sees that it can put text in behind, and now we're going to tell this specifically that I want you to wrap the text around the object of this girl. So we're going to need to bring up our text wrap window here. Underneath window, it says text wrap. It will bring up a little dialog box that looks something similar to this. And we want to select our wrap around object shape. So when we first select this, it's just going to wrap around the square frame that we already have in place here for this picture. But what's really cool, because the strength of Photoshop and InDesign all work together, is I can now wrap here. If I use this contour options, I can say detect edges, and it's now going to automatically detect where the edge of the picture is and bring that text to wrap all the way around. Now, if I don't want it to wrap quite so close to an image, I can increase here the wrap spacing. So if you notice real close, I'll zoom in for you. You can see that it creates this little blue line that goes around your image all the way around. And the more I increase this size, the further out that blue image goes, or that blue line goes. And the more I bring it in, obviously the closer it gets. Now I can even go under if I wanted, if I want a negative. But again, that's not going to help us because now we're starting to lose words. So we're just going to have it be like a 0.6 out, just a real small little gap between her hair and where the words end. And then in behind here, if you notice, we've got these stray words that try to jump in behind, which is really, really awkward and doesn't really work very well when you're trying to read a sentence and have it jump across. So we're going to zoom in even more. And if I take the direct selection tool, it will now show me all the little points associated with this path that goes around our subject here. And I can select on them individually and just kind of pull them out. And that's actually going to force those words to go back to the other side. So it might take a few tries here to pull it out enough so that none of the words show up. But you can just kind of randomly pull this path out. And now all the words will stay in front of the girl instead of behind. So I'm just going to zoom back out again here. So you can see now we very neatly have this text wrapping all the way around her and not going in behind it all. Now, if you notice, if I select my text tool and I select this big batch of text here, this text actually doesn't fit on the screen anymore. It's actually gone out the edge of the screen. If you notice, there's a plus sign here. Because we've scaled it around her, there's actually a bunch of text that's not being shown anymore, and we need to include that. Obviously, if you only had this much space in your article, you could tell your person to rewrite the article and make it more condensed and try to shrink it down. But if that's not an issue, which in our case it's not really an issue, we simply just need to click on this plus sign. It will now bring up a little icon showing what text is missing, and I can double click onto page 4 here, and now I can create a new text box just by clicking and dragging down to add in the leftover text. And if you notice, I still have the links showing here. So now it's linked from this page up above down to this new 4th page, and we have ourselves the remainder of this text that should have been here. Okay? So in a nutshell, that's sort of the basics of InDesign. Gives you a really brief overview of all the different things that can be done in InDesign. The next step, though, is to print this off. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. We're going to save this as a couple different versions, and then we're going to print it off in a very specific way. Unfortunately, our computers and our tech department here, for some reason, we can't print directly from InDesign, but that's okay. Adobe PDF works just fine, and it works almost even better in terms of making simple booklets. We can just make them right within Adobe Reader or Adobe Acrobat, and away we go. So right now, we are just going to save this. So File, save this document. You should have already had it saved as the InDesign Basics underscore whatever your last name is. And then we're going to do a special thing. We're going to actually export this document. And we want to export it as a PDF. So we're going to go File, Export. And it will bring up a dialog box here, and it's going to ask us what type. So again, similar to before, we want to print PDF. So we're going to export this as the same name, InDesign Basics underscore right, or your last name, and do it as a PDF, as a print PDF. And when we hit save now, it's going to, again, give us the same dialog box. We want it high quality, everything's standard. Make sure that you've selected pages when you export. This is really crucial because we want it to export each page individually. Even though page 2 and 3 are across from each other and would be considered a spread, we need them to be saved individually in order for us to print it properly. So when you make sure you've got the pages checked, and then we hit export. And now what it's going to do is it's going to export this. Now some of your computers are super fast and we won't have an issue, but if you were concerned about it, you could click on the background tasks tab here, and it would show you, it would give you an alert saying that this document is still saving or it's still rendering or whatever might be happening. With these new computers, very rarely do we have these issues. It tends to save very fast, and we shouldn't have too many issues. So now, for now, we're pretty much done in InDesign. So we're going to actually close InDesign and just get it out of the way for now. And we're going to go back to Adobe Bridge. Now, in Adobe Bridge, you should have in your Block 3 folder, you should have your Adobe InDesign from yesterday or the new saved version. Okay. It will then also have your PDF, and it'll show you what it's going to look like. And the really cool thing about this, because again, Adobe works with Adobe, so I can actually select through the pages of my design and look at them without even having to open the PDF. I can see, okay, everything's there, all my design components are there. And so now we want to print this off. So we're going to have to open this with Adobe PDF. Now, if I simply just double click on this, Adobe is smart enough to know that I want to look at Adobe Reader. It's going to open up Adobe Reader for me, and I'm going to be able to then print this off right from within Adobe Reader. So I'm going to pause right now and create a second video specifically about printing so that you can refer back to it later. So at this point, we'll just hit pause. So thank you again for watching this video. It's a two-parter. Hopefully you got the first part. You were able to download it and watch it. We really enjoy you watching our channel, and hope you subscribe and like and all that fun stuff to get us more viewers. Have a good time.